Tech Revision with Mrs. Swanee Pooh.
Hi everyone, this video is going to focus on the two design companies that you need to have an awareness for the GCSE exam. So in the book, which I'm going to talk about in a second, you need to choose two companies, the ones that we have gone for and the ones that I've gone through with my groups are Apple and Dyson. So we're going to have a look at those in a bit more detail so that if you come across a question like this, you've got enough to talk about to get you the marks. So just a reminder that this comes up in section C in the exam. So remember that you have the multiple choice section, section B where you might be asked about polymers and manufacturing processes and maybe some sustainability stuff. And then section C, you could potentially get a question that asks you about designers. Remember we went through Philippe Starck and Marcel Breuer in a previous video, or design companies. And in this section, you can also get questions about drawing techniques and things like that. So luckily, you only need to know about two designers, two design companies. The two design companies that we've gone for are Dyson and Apple. So anyone from my groups should have gotten two sheets that look a little bit like this. But don't worry, we're going to talk through this. If you haven't seen these before, don't worry about it. We're going to go through them, pick out some of the main points, the main things about Apple, the main things about Dyson that has they're kind of what they've been inspired by, what the design ethos is, the rules that they follow when they're designing, some of their famous products, and some of the stuff that you can talk about if you get a question about companies. So the first one we are going to have a look at is Apple. So obviously a very, very popular brand. Most students in school seem to have iPhones, so you probably are familiar with their products. Some of the key designers and people that you need to know about are Steve Jobs, who was one of the founders of the company, but I would argue that for a design question, you want to be talking more about Jonathan Ive. He was a British designer. He was chief designer at Apple from 97 to 2019, and he was responsible for a lot of the products that helped to save Apple, because Apple were actually going out of business. They were going to disappear because their products were quite unsuccessful. So when Sir Johnny Ive, came into the business or came into the company, he revolutionized the design of their products and kind of established them as the leader of design that they are now kind of thought of as. So Jonathan Ive was inspired by a guy called Dieter Rams. He designed for a company called Braun, which some of you might recognize from things like shavers and all that sort of stuff. It's the same company. And they used to design products like radios and kind of hi-fis and things like that. But Dieter Rams had this idea of 10 principles of good design. So these are like rules for which you should design by. So if you Google that, 10 principles of good design, you will get this here. And you can see that some of these link quite nicely to how Apple design. So good design is aesthetic. Okay, all Apple products are thought about really, really carefully, attention to detail. They look stylish. They are desirable to the user. So that's a big part of how Apple products are designed. Some other really good ones that you could mention. Good design makes a product understandable. One of the key reasons that Apple products were so successful is they are so intuitive. So we're getting a little bit now onto the design ethos, how Apple actually design. So Apple's designs are intuitive. It's really, really obvious how to use them, how to interact with them. So that meant that a really wide range of people could quickly and easily pick up, say, the iPhone and understand the touchscreen, understand the slide to unlock, understand how to make a picture bigger and smaller by sort of pinching the screen. So all of those things made the product understandable, and this was one of the key things that Apple did to be so successful. Okay. Some other ones that you can talk about: good design is thorough down to the last detail. So every tiny little detail on an Apple product is thought about and carefully designed. And quite often, good design is as little design as possible. So you could say that some of Apple's products are quite minimalistic, quite clean and quite simple, and with very simple color schemes. So some other things that you could reference: Apple products, there is a beauty in the simplicity of their products. Again, they are easy to use, links nicely with products being intuitive. And where quite complex products like this before, so for example, if you imagine the BlackBerry that was kind of the smartphone of the time, if you Google an old BlackBerry, it used to have like millions of tiny little keys, like the whole alphabet on the keyboard, which if you imagine you gave that to someone who's not quite so techie, can be quite intimidating and not easily understandable. But then suddenly they were given an iPhone with very obvious icons to click on, and that's why the iPhone was so successful at the time, and why the majority of smartphones, if not all smartphones, are now designed in a similar way. Designs are friendly, which is quite a weird thing to say, but they build a connection to the user. So Apple users tend to be quite brand loyal. Once you've got Apple, you don't tend to go back because you're kind of linked into the way their products work, and you enjoy the way the products work. And like we've said before, the precision and the attention to detail is really important. So one other thing that I want to mention, if you want to get some really good marks in the exam, if anything about Apple comes up, they use this thing called Skew Omorphism, which is a really weird term. And I'll show you kind of what that means now. Skew Omorphism means to kind of make maybe something that's quite new look familiar. So for example, here, this first example, you can see that this is like a note, the little notepad kind of app on an iPhone, old iPhone. They've made it actually look like a notepad with lines and all sorts. There used to actually be an app where you could look at magazines. They've made the magazine app look like you're just grabbing them off the shelf. This microphone app, it looks, you know, like you've got a microphone in front of you, you've got the record button, you've got the pause, you've even got the sound like it would be on sort of an old-fashioned microphone. And the compass here, as you can see, is very kind of familiar because it literally looks like a compass. So when they first came out, the Apple sort of operating system, their apps actually looked like what they would look like in real life. So for example, here you can see here's a real calculator. That's what the app used to look like. And now that people have become more accustomed to how these apps work, you can see that they've kind of made the design of the apps much cleaner and much more simple now that people are familiar with them. So this is called, like I said, Skew Omorphism. So try and get that in your head. It's a really good term to bring in if you're talking about anything to do with Apple. So here are quickly some really famous products. So you might be asked in the exam to give examples of products, and what you don't want to be doing is just talking about the latest iPhone. You don't want to be doing that because Apple released some really revolutionary products, and I would say that their modern products are just sort of iterations of the same thing, and iterations means just newer versions with very few changes. So the kind of product that saved Apple was this thing here, which is called the iMac G3, and it came out in 1998. And this was basically the first sort of desktop computer that was colourful. It had all of the computer components inside the monitor. So this was the entire computer, obviously apart from a keyboard and some speakers. It was kind of funky and stylish, very innovative at the time. When actually computers during this time, and I had one myself, they were like beige boxes, really boring. And these, everyone wanted these. They were marketed really cleverly, had a really stylish, fun advert for them. So the iMac G3 is one of the key products to make sure that you talk about. I would also say the iPod with its original click wheel, this kind of really intuitive way of scrolling through songs. And also the white headphones of Apple, really iconic. If you think now, you can't really look anywhere without seeing white headphones, AirPods, all that sort of stuff. Became really kind of classic of Apple, and loads of their adverts just had sort of like silhouettes of people, but with the white headphones in. It kind of became quite iconic of Apple. The iPhone, the original iPhone, was the first touchscreen phone, and the operating system, like I said, used that Skew Omorphism. So you can see like the little calendar, the camera looks like a little lens. So all of those apps help to make the product feel quite intuitive and easy to use. And I mean, this was huge, absolutely huge, because it meant all phones that came after it looked like this, basically. And iPhone actually sued Samsung for basically copying, because all of Samsung phones and other phones copied a lot of the same sort of tech. And then probably I guess that you've got the iWatch and all that sort of stuff, but the iPad as well was quite revolutionary at the time, and it kind of became or began the popularity of tablets. So those are some famous products you can talk about. Don't be afraid of talking about your latest iPhone, that's fine, but make sure you mention some of these more sort of classic products, because these were the big ones that made Apple the leader that it is. Right, so I've crammed everything for Dyson onto one slide. So I'll talk about this as much as I can, but Dyson is quite a different type of company to Apple. They are kind of much more an engineering company. So they kind of focus on invention and technology. So the key people that you need to know about are James Dyson, obviously, who established the company, was an inventor, came up with the original idea for the dual cyclone technology, which meant that vacuums no longer needed to have a bag in them. So make sure you know James Dyson. I've had everything from John Dyson to Chris Dyson to Phil Dyson. Just make sure it's James Dyson, okay? Don't get that wrong. And he was inspired by the spirit of invention and proper engineering. So he was frustrated by his vacuum cleaner losing power. So he saw a problem and he chose to fix it, which is engineering at its kind of basic form. So he saw in a local sawmill that they use this cyclone technology to separate sawdust particles from the air, and he thought, how can I adapt that into a product? So a big thing about Dyson was he believed that failure was a good thing. It was part of the process. So he made 5,127 prototypes of this dual cyclone technology before it actually worked. But all of those failures helped him to make a better product. Another important thing is he was guided by practicality, not appearance. Okay, he wanted the products to look good and look high tech, but it was more about how the user interacts with the products and uses them, rather than it looking sort of eye-catching and stylish, even though I would say that they have got quite a distinctive look. This is quite a good one here, a good little quote that you could say in an exam answer. The engineers at Dyson, they constantly question the things that exist and think about how to improve them. So this links quite nicely with this point here, that they tend to try and solve problems that others have ignored. So there are things like the Dyson Air multiplier, which is a fan, and this basically confronted the problem of fans that have been pretty much the same for years and years and years, well, since 1882. But, you know, the effect of a fan blowing everything all over the place and making the air really choppy and the noise and all that sort of stuff was kind of ignored. So they decided to fix that problem. And that's their whole thing. They enjoy solving problems that others have ignored. Okay. The ergonomics of the products tend to be quite a focus. So ergonomics is all about the comfort, how a product is designed to interact with people. So the weight of the product, you know, how you highlight where buttons and important parts of the product are. So they do that really well with color. So all the important parts of the product are highlighted in bright colors to make it really obvious how the user interacts with it. And they also want unmatched level of performance. So they want their products to be the best in the field, to have the best suction possible, the best technology, the best lithium batteries, the best digital motors, all of that stuff. They want to be market leaders. So some famous products that you need to get your head around. This one's really big here. The DC01. This was the first vacuum that was kind of, you know, the breakthrough product for Dyson. We had one. If you asked your parents, I bet you they had one as well. And this is what made Dyson big. Do not make the mistake of writing Hoover, because a Hoover, that's a brand name. So that will not look good in the exam. Make sure that you talk about vacuums. Dyson vacuum, not a Dyson Hoover, okay? So that doesn't make any sense. It's like talking about a Samsung Apple. Hoover's a brand name, okay? So yeah, the Dyson vacuum, really important. It had the patented dual cyclone technology. It has the bright colors. You can see the technology inside. You can see the dust being collected. So that's a really famous one to talk about. I've got one of these. I bet lots of you guys have got these as well. These Dyson animal vacuums have got the strongest suction of any cordless vacuum. It has a lot of, at the time, sort of new technology, the digital motor, which was very powerful, and a really high performance lithium battery. And the last one that you could talk about is the fan with no fan, basically. It's quite revolutionary. So again, that is kind of like a good one to talk about when you talk, when you mention the point of solving problems that others have ignored. So the idea of the fan, like I said, has been sort of left how it is for years and years and years, and there you go, Dyson sort of reinvented it in a really interesting and innovative way. And lots of you will have seen this crazy product. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Combining kind of clean air with noise cancelling headphones. I'm not 100% sure, and the reviews have not been particularly brilliant. So yeah, some of the products are a bit hit and miss, I would imagine. Okay, so last thing I'm going to say in this is that this is the kind of question that you could potentially come up against. So choosing one of the companies from table 3, outline the design features or manufacturing techniques that have made your chosen company successful. So Apple would be a good one, obviously, and Dyson. Don't start talking about products that you've got no blooming clue about. Even if you own an Under Armour t-shirt, don't start rambling on about Under Armour. Oh yeah, they look great, t-shirts, blah, blah, blah. You don't have enough to talk about. And just because you bought some jeans in Primark once, don't start talking about Primark. Focus on the ones that you hopefully know much more about. Right, hope that was useful. See you on the next video.